My name is Elara Vance, and I was 32 the night I finally understood the fundamental lie I'd lived for 14 years, that my parents could only ever stretch for one. It meant they couldn't fund my college, but paid for every whim of my younger sister. Then, at my sister Celeste's charity gala, her fiancé, Liam O'Connell, turned around from the podium and our eyes met. That moment changed everything. Did he know? In that instant, the facade crumbled. He recognized me, the engineer who'd pulled him from a collapsed building years ago, the woman my family had erased, the true owner of this very estate. Within minutes, 14 years of carefully constructed deception began to unravel, threatening to expose not just a missing trust fund, but a lifetime of calculated cruelty. My mother, mid-sentence, champagne glass in hand, her mouth still half open on another carefully crafted lie, had no idea the exposure was coming until the very end. Before I tell you what happened next, if you enjoy stories about justice and family boundaries, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with the story. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Drop a comment and let me know. My name is Elara Vance, and I was 32 the day my sister's charity gala came apart in front of 200 people. When I was 18, I asked my parents for help with tuition. My mother looked at me across the breakfast nook and gave me 2 words. Forge your own path. Then they paid for every single thing my younger sister ever wanted. So I walked away, and I stayed gone for 14 years. I built a whole life they never once asked about. But what happened when my sister's fiancé turned around and saw my face standing at the back of that ballroom? None of them saw that coming. And if I'm being honest with you, neither did I. I was a senior in high school the spring everything got decided for me. Though it took me years to understand it had been decided at all. I'd gotten into the state university an hour north. Not a fancy school, a solid one with an engineering program I'd circled in the catalog until the ink smudged. I'd done the math at the kitchen table the way other girls did their nails. Careful and slow. The numbers scared me. So one night in April, I asked my parents for help, and I made sure to ask it small. My mother was wiping down the counter. She didn't even stop. You're a smart girl, Elara, she said. Forge your own path. That was it. My father, Arthur, a retired maritime engineer, was sitting 4 feet away with a boating magazine folded in his lap, and he looked out the window like there was something fascinating out in the dark. I didn't cry. I want you to know that because it matters later. I nodded once, said, and went up to my room. The morning I left for my machinist apprenticeship that summer, a few weeks after I turned 19, I found a folded index card tucked into the side pocket of my tool bag. My mother's handwriting. Forge your own path. 2 words, no signature, like a fortune cookie from someone who'd never wished me well. I almost left it on the porch. Instead, I zipped it into the inside pocket where I kept my ID, and I carried it for 14 years without once admitting to myself why. I thought back then that those were the cruelest 2 words my family would ever hand me. I was wrong. They were just the first. Here's the part that took the air out of me, even years later. My sister Celeste is 3 years younger than me, and the fall I left for industrial fabrication, she was a sophomore in high school, already talking about a private college down in Virginia, with historic iron gates. When her turn came, there was no breakfast nook speech. There was a check, then another check, tuition, a meal plan, a luxury compact that wasn't very used, a study abroad semester in Paris with a stipend for incidentals. I didn't learn most of this until later in pieces, the way you find out the weather in a town you no longer live in, but I knew the shape of it even then. I'd seen the brochure on the counter, the deposit envelope already stamped. And when an aunt once asked, gentle, why they could swing one girl and not the other, my mother had an answer ready, smooth as a stone she'd been turning in her pocket for years. We could only ever stretch for one. She said it like a sad fact about the economy. She said it the way you'd say it had rained. I remember standing in that kitchen at 18, looking at a college deposit slip with my sister's name on it, and feeling something go quiet and hard in my chest. Not rage, something colder and more useful than rage. I didn't know yet that the money had never been the thing in short supply. I only knew the choice felt aimed. Why her, and not me? That question followed me onto the bus into my workshop across state lines and back. It would take a dead woman's handwriting to finally answer it. People expect this to be the part where the abandoned girl falls apart. Sorry to disappoint. I went to a fabrication shop in an industrial park 2 towns over, the one between a welding supply and a custom signage place, and I signed my own name on my own line while a shop foreman the size of a refrigerator watched me do it. I was 19. I picked precision machining because it would pay for school the long way around, and because it was the one institution I could find that promised to make me into something whether or not anyone at home approved. I didn't slam a door on my way out of my parents' house. I just stopped knocking on theirs. I called twice that first year. The first time my mother put Celeste on to tell me about Paris. The second time nobody picked up, and I decided that was an answer, too. And I stopped dialing. Apprenticeship is loud and stupid, and exactly what a furious 19-year-old needs. They yell at you about your safety goggles while you privately reassemble your entire idea of yourself. I was good at it. Not perfect. I have a temper I keep on a short leash and a habit of carrying more than my share, but good. I made lead. I qualified. I learned that independence, it turns out, is a skill you can overlearn until it stops being a strength and starts being a wall. But that lesson was years off. At 19, I just knew this. Nobody was coming to save me. And somewhere along the road, from that breakfast nook to that industrial park office, I decided to stop waiting for them to. I'd save myself. Thank you. I'd just save everyone else, too, while I was at it. 14 years go by faster than you'd think when you refuse to look back. I apprenticed. Then I got picked up for a program that set me to finish my engineering degree and come back as a lead fabricator, which is a long way of saying the industry paid for the college my parents wouldn't. By 32, I was running my own custom fabrication shop, which surprised everyone except me. I took on a pro bono project once. I'll get to that because it matters more than I knew at the time. I learned to lead people who were tired and scared and far from home. And I was good at it for one simple reason. I never asked anybody to carry something I wasn't already carrying myself. That was the strength. It was also the wall. I didn't take help. Not from friends. Not from the counselor they made me see after the pro bono project. Not from the journeyman who once tried to split my workload and got a polite, "I've got it," for his trouble. I carried everyone. I asked for nothing. Somewhere in those 14 years that stopped being discipline and started being loneliness, wearing discipline's uniform, there's one object from that whole stretch I want you to hold on to because it comes back. A custom fabricated compass rose. Heavy brass. My shop's crest worn smooth on one side from the thing I'd do without noticing. Turn it over and over my pocket when a negotiation got tense or a design got close. I had it the night everything good and terrible happened on that project. I didn't know yet that there was a second compass rose just like it in another man's pocket, 3 states from my parents' breakfast nook, waiting at a gala I had no intention of attending. There was exactly one person in my family who never let me disappear, and her name was Eleanor, my grandmother, my mother's mother, which made what I'd later learn about her all the more cutting. Eleanor ran a little historic waterfront estate outside Charleston, South Carolina. 3 acres of manicured gardens and a grand old house that needed constant upkeep the whole time I knew it. For 14 years, she was the only one who wrote birthday cards. A clipped recipe I'd never make. Once a photo of the estate's dock at sunset with 4 words on the back, "Still here. Still yours." I didn't understand that last word until much later. Eleanor died in March at 89 in her own bed, which is the only mercy in this whole story. After the funeral arrangements got handled by people who were better at handling things than my mother, a lawyer in Charleston, Mr. Davies, called me at my shop. Eleanor had named me executive of her estate, and there was a letter sealed with my name on it in that shaky, strong hand. The lawyer read me one line over the phone because he said Eleanor had asked him to in case I needed convincing to come. "Come home one more time, Elara. And don't let your mother rewrite you." Eleanor never wasted a word in her life. She'd say storm brewing and mean a week of it. So that last line, "Don't let your mother rewrite you," sat in my chest like a swallowed compass rose. Rewrite me how? I'd been gone almost a decade and a half. There was nothing left to edit. That's what I told myself on the phone with Mr. Davies in the calm, flat voice I use when I'm lying to someone, and the someone is me. 2 envelopes reached me the same week, which tells you everything about my family's sense of timing. One was the formal estate paperwork. The other was thick and cream-colored, embossed. And when I slid my thumb under the flap, I already knew Celeste's charity gala for Du Bois Elite Travel's 25th anniversary was in June at Eleanor's estate. They'd booked my dead grandmother's historic property for the event before the woman was 3 months in the ground, and they'd done it, I'd later understand, on the comfortable assumption that the estate was as good as theirs. The invitation listed my parents, Vivian and Arthur Du Bois, as hosts. It did not list me anywhere. Tucked behind it was a smaller card in my mother's hand. "We hope you'll come. It would mean a lot to your sister." I read that line 4 times trying to find the part that sounded like it was meant for me, and I couldn't. My family always did love a theme, and the theme that week was apparently homecoming on their terms. I had every reason to send my regrets and a nice gift basket, but I was the executive. Eleanor's estate ran through the property, and the property now had a gala stapled to it, and somebody who understood both grief and contracts needed to be in that ballroom. That somebody was me, and under all the logistics, quieter than I wanted to admit, was a dead woman's sentence telling me to come home one more time. So, I put in for leave for my shop. I told myself it was about the estate. I told myself I'd keep it professional, say my congratulations, sign what needed signing, and be wheels up before the main award. I am very good at telling myself things. I booked the flight to Charleston that night. I flew into Charleston on a Thursday and rented a gray sedan that smelled like someone else's air freshener. The historic district is just a short drive, past the bustling market and then past everything until the cobblestone streets narrow and the Spanish moss starts and your phone gives up on you. I did not go to my parents' house. I want to be clear about that because it stays true the whole way through. I checked into the Harbor View and off Meeting Street, room 102, and I'd note the number, except that turned out to be the least insulting 102 of my week. I drove out to the estate Friday morning to start on Eleanor's papers, and my mother was already there in the grand foyer, arranging magnolias like she owned the antique vases. "Elara," she said, and hugged me the way you'd hug a coat rack. "You look so practical," she said. Practical the way other people say, unfortunate. Celeste breezed through in designer athleisure, glanced at me, and asked if I'd be okay finding something to do while they handled gala things. Nobody told the 2 event planners who I was. Nobody told the caterer setting up tastings that the woman in the corner was the honoree's sister. I watched my family introduce me to strangers as Vivian's other daughter, like a footnote nobody reads. If you've ever driven a long way back to a place that made you small just to keep a promise to someone you loved, you already know the exact weight that settles on your chest in the doorway. Stay with me here, because it's about to matter more than any of them realized. My mother runs a family the way some people run a small, anxious kingdom. Warmth as currency, doled out for compliance, clawed back for the slightest independent thought. By Friday afternoon, I'd remembered all of it in my body before my brain caught up. Vivian narrating my life back to me in a version I didn't recognize. Elara always needed to do things her own way. She told an aunt with a little laugh while I stood close enough to hear. We just let her. Look how strong she turned out. Forge your own path repackaged as a gift she'd given me. The way an arsonist might take credit for the warmth. I kept my voice level and helped fold place cards I hadn't been asked to fold because old habits stand at attention faster than you can stop them. There was something underneath my mother's performance, though, and 20 years of reading rooms had taught me to feel it before I could name it. She kept circling back to me, kept touching my arm, asking about the estate process, whether it was complicated, whether everything would just go where it was supposed to. For a woman who'd treated me like a draft she'd thrown out, she was awfully interested in keeping me in the room. My father mostly hovered at the edges with a coffee he never drank, saying my name once an hour, like he was testing whether it still worked. I couldn't figure out what my mother wanted from me. She'd spent 14 years, making it clear I was surplus. Now she was orbiting me like I had something she needed. I'd find out exactly what it was by Saturday. I just had to survive Friday's dinner first, and the seating chart that came with it. The gala seating chart was taped to a large foam board in the estate's library, and I found my own name on it the way you find a typo. Table 12, back corner by the service entrance, the table they'd clearly built out of leftovers. A college roommate of Celeste's, 2 junior travel agents, somebody's +1. My card when I dug it out of the box at the welcome table read Elara, guest. The question mark wasn't a smudge. Somebody had genuinely not been sure of my name and decided a question mark was close enough. The same family that could spell the calligrapher's fee down to the cent had penciled a question mark where their daughter should be. I held that card a long time. Then Celeste found me and asked, sweet as anything, if I'd do her a huge favor and help the rental guys move the display pedestals since I was used to that kind of thing. She meant my physical work. She meant labor. We kept it intimate, she added, gesturing at 200 chairs.
You know how it is.
Could only stretch the budget so far. There it was again. That family proverb dusted off for a new generation. We could only ever stretch for one. I moved the pedestals. I'm not too proud to move pedestals, but somewhere between the 3rd display and the 4th, I understood the assignment I'd been given for this entire weekend. And it wasn't honoree's sister or executive or even guest. It was furniture, useful, silent in the back, present enough to fill a corner, and invisible enough to never threaten the picture. I set the last pedestal down, brushed off my hands, and thought very calmly. Not this time. I didn't know yet how right I'd be. I still hadn't met her fiancé. By Friday evening, I'd heard about him the way you hear about weather in a place you're visiting. Secondhand, cheerful, a little vague. His name was Liam. He was a former first responder, which an aunt mentioned twice with her hand on her heart, as though serving and being shot at were the same as being a hero in a movie. Such a sweetheart, the aunt said. And those manners? Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. He'd grown up 2 hours away, met Celeste at a mutual friend's yacht club event, and he was at that exact moment off picking up his former squad members from the regional airport. 3 groomsmen flying in for the weekend. I filed all of it under not my circus. A former first responder marrying my sister. Small world, sure, but the world is full of former first responders. We are not a rare bird. I didn't think anything of it. And I want you to notice that I didn't, because that's the honest part. I was a lead fabricator who had worked with hundreds of people and crossed paths with thousands. And a guy named Liam, who was a first responder, narrowed nothing down. If anything, I felt a flicker of something almost like relief. At least there'd be one person at this gala who'd understand why I'd wear what I planned to wear, who wouldn't ask me if my work attire was a costume. I helped clear the rehearsal dinner dishes, declined a glass of wine, and went back to room 102 at the Harbor View Inn by 9. A former first responder named Liam. I should have thought about it harder. I didn't. And the thing I wasn't thinking about was at that hour, an hour away, gassing up a rental van and telling 3 other men about the engineer who'd once saved his life. Saturday was the gala, but Saturday morning early was mine. As executive, I had a key to the estate house and a job to do. Inventory Eleanor's things before the estate could close. I let myself in at 6 o'clock while the gardens were still gray and the caterers hadn't arrived, and I started in her study, which still smelled like her. Old books and cedar and the jasmine she grew by the porch. My mother showed up at 6:40. She has a sense for whenever I'm somewhere I might learn something. You're up early? She said, not a question, eyeing the desk drawers I'd opened. She started straightening things I hadn't disturbed. Then, light as a feather, she'd been practicing. You know, when all the estate business wraps up, the property should really just come back to the family, to your father and me. Mom always meant for us to have it. It would be a nightmare to sort otherwise. There's a particular tone people use when they're telling you a lie they need you to repeat. My mother was using it. I said the estate would go wherever Eleanor's document said it would go, and I'd honor that, whatever it was. My mother's smile thinned to a wire. Of course, she said. It's just paperwork. She lingered until the event planners arrived, then drifted out to manage them, and I went back to the drawers. Bottom one, under a stack of folded blueprints, my hand hit something that wasn't paper. A bank folder soft at the corners from years of handling, fat with statements, and clipped to the front. A sealed envelope with my name on it. Eleanor's hand, the second letter she'd left me. My mother had been straightening that exact desk. She had no idea what was in the drawer beneath her hands. I didn't open the folder right away. That's the discipline talking. You secure the scene before you read the intel. I slid it into my bag, kept inventorying, and let my mother think she'd won the morning. She came back through twice, and the second time, she couldn't help herself. She picked up a framed photo of Eleanor and me from when I was small, the two of us on the porch swing, and she said, looking at it, "She always did spoil you a bit. We couldn't, you understand, with two of you. We could only ever stretch for one." Third time I'd heard that sentence in 24 hours. And this time something in me wanted to put down the clipboard and ask her very quietly to define stretch, to explain the luxury compact in Paris and the historic Iron Gate tuition, to ask whether stretch had a different meaning when the money flowed toward Celeste. I felt the old temper test its leash. I've learned over 14 years, and one critical project, that the most powerful person in any room is almost never the one raising their voice. It's the one who's already decided, and isn't telling you yet. So I smiled, the flat professional smile, and said, "Two of us, right?" And I let her have the last word because the last word is cheap, and I was about to have something better. She set the photo down crooked and left to go argue with the event planner about floral arrangements. The study went quiet. Dust turned in the light from Eleanor's window, and I sat down on the edge of my grandmother's armchair, took out the bank folder, and finally opened the drawer my whole childhood had been hiding in. The folder was full of statements for an account I'd never heard of, an educational trust, open the year I was born, in Eleanor's name, with both granddaughters listed as beneficiaries. I read the front page 3 times to make the words stop swimming. There was a deposit history going back 2 decades. Birthday money, the sale of a back parcel of land, a small inheritance Eleanor had gotten and quietly poured in. By the time I turned 18, that account had held just under $250,000 earmarked in Eleanor's own block letters on the cover sheet for both girls' education. Eleanor had handed it to my mother to manage when her eyes started going, and the withdrawals told the rest of the story without me. Celeste's tuition, Celeste's housing, a wire to a study abroad program in Paris, France. Line after line, the same account my mother said didn't exist, drained into one daughter, while the other was told to forge her own path at a breakfast nook. Then the letter in Eleanor's hand. "Elara, this money was always for both of you, equal, no matter what your mother told you. I gave it to her to do right. She didn't. I'm sorry. I trusted the wrong person, to be fair to you. The money's mostly gone now, but the truth isn't, and the truth is yours. Don't let her tell you it was ever about money. It was about her, and it never should have cost you a thing." I sat in that study and felt the floor go out from under 14 years of a story I'd told myself. We could only stretch for one. It wasn't a hardship. It was a choice dressed up as one, decades long. And my own grandmother had watched it happen and finally written it down. If you've ever found proof that the story they told you about yourself was never true, that it was a decision wearing the costume of a hardship, then you know how loud a quiet room can get. I wasn't done with that drawer. Behind the bank folder, in a plain manila envelope from Mr. Davies' office, was Eleanor's will. I'd seen a summary of it as executive, the broad strokes, small bequests, the garden equipment, a savings account that would cover the funeral, and then some. But the central provision I'd somehow not been walked through yet, because the lawyer had wanted me to read it in Eleanor's own words first, and Eleanor had clipped a note to it. Read the part about the estate sitting down. So I sat. The estate, the house, the 3 acres, the gardens my sister was about to host a gala in roughly 5 hours, was left in full and without condition to me. Elara Eleanor Vance, not to my mother, not split, not held in trust for the family. To me, the granddaughter they'd questioned marked on a place card. Eleanor had a line for that, too. "I'm not leaving it to your mother because she'd sell the antique furniture and call it stretching. I'm leaving it to the one who knows what it's like to be told there isn't enough. You'll know what is." I read it twice. Then I looked out Eleanor's window at the grand tent going up in the gardens, the chairs I'd moved lined in neat rows, my mother gesturing at an event planner with a clipboard. They were building a gala on land that, as of 3 months ago, belonged entirely to me, and none of them knew. My mother had spent the morning trying to talk me into giving the estate back to the family. and the whole time she'd been standing on it as a trespasser. I closed the envelope. My hands were steady. That surprised me a little. The obvious move was sitting right there. And I'm not going to pretend I didn't pick it up and feel its weight. I could walk out into that garden, find the event planner, and inform her that the venue's actual owner had not authorized this event. I could let my mother explain to 200 guests why the honoree's grandmother's estate had a stranger's name on the deed. The temptation was clean and bright, and it tasted like 14 years of swallowed breakfast nook mornings. I sat with it, then I put it down. Not because I'd gone soft. I want to be honest, it wasn't forgiveness. It was that I'd watched my mother turn cruelty into a story she told herself about strength. And I knew if I blew up Celeste's gala out of nowhere, that story would just get a new chapter. Elara, always making it about herself. Elara, so bitter she ruined her sister's day. I'd hand them the exact narrative Eleanor told me not to let them write. The thing about being told your whole life that you're the difficult one is that you become very, very careful not to be. That's the wall again. That's the over-responsibility. The part of me that even now was wondering whether I shouldn't quietly help these people, whether keeping the peace was the mature thing. I sat on my dead grandmother's armchair and argued with myself in two voices, the fabricator and the daughter. And the fabricator won the way she usually does. I'd hold the truth. I'd say my congratulations, sign the estate papers Monday, and let the deed speak in its own time on paper in a lawyer's office, like a grown woman. That was the plan. The plan held right up until a man turned around at the reception. I changed into civilian clothes and went back to the estate at noon to help because apparently I cannot stop myself, and because the alternative was sitting in room 102 with a deed burning a hole in my bag. Celeste had reached the stage of gala morning where an honoree becomes a weather system. She found me near the main entrance and handed me a box of glass votives to fill with floating candles. And I did it, and they looked good. And she rearranged every single one without looking at me. Try to blend in today, okay? She said, eyeing my jeans like they'd personally offended her. It's a lot of important people. Then half to herself, half to the assistant beside her. Elara wanted to forge her own path. So, she can be independent in the back. A little laugh. The assistant laughed because you laugh at the honoree. Forge your own path. My mother's 2 words inherited by my sister, like a set of good china. Used now to mean stay out of the picture. I set the last votive down. I didn't say anything, because the thing about a daisy cutter of a line is that it does its own damage. You don't have to add to it. I just looked at my little sister, 29 and radiant, and absolutely certain that the order of the world placed her at the center, and me by the service entrance. And I felt the strangest thing, not anger, pity almost, that she'd been raised to be so sure. Celeste had been handed everything, including the belief that she'd earned it, and nobody had ever told her the bill existed, let alone who'd paid it. I went to find the seating chart, the one with my question mark on it, and still somehow I had not met her fiancé. By the time the light went gold and the photographers started gathering people for pre-gala shots, I had reached my limit and made a decision. I'd watch the award presentation from the back, skip the receiving line, leave my gift, and drive the gray sedan back to the Harbor View Inn before the band even tuned up. The fiancé and his 3 squad members had been a moving target all afternoon, tucked away in the old carriage house that served as the men's staging area, doing whatever grooms and groomsmen do, while the women orbited Celeste. I'd seen the back of a dark head in a sharp suit through the carriage house door once, and registered nothing but a fellow professional having a worse day than he knew. I had my keys in my hand. I was standing by the gravel drive, genuinely leaving, when I made the mistake of reaching into my inside pocket for the rental key fob, and my fingers found the index card instead. Forge your own path, 14 years old, soft as cloth now. And underneath it, Eleanor's voice from the letter. Don't let your mother rewrite you. I stood there in the estate my grandmother had left me, holding the cruelest thing my mother ever wrote, and the kindest thing Eleanor ever did. And I understood that leaving quietly was just a different way of letting them have the last word. Eleanor hadn't asked me to come home to fold votives and disappear. She'd asked me not to vanish. So, I put the keys back in my pocket. I'd stay for the award presentation. I'd stay through one glass of something and a slice of cake. I'd be seen just for an evening by people who'd spent a decade and a half pretending I wasn't there. I had no idea that being seen was about to stop being my decision. I'd brought my professional attire. I want to explain that because my mother made it into an accusation, and it wasn't one. Eleanor 2 Christmases back had mailed me a card that said she'd give anything to see me in my custom-tailored work jacket just once before she got too old. She never did. So when I packed for Charleston, I packed the jacket. Half for the funeral that had already happened, and half because it felt like the one promise to Eleanor I could still keep. The gala was at 7. At 6:15, I came out of the estate's powder room in my dark, custom-tailored jacket, subtle metal details and all, my shop's emblem on the lapel, and my mother turned from the mirror where she was fixing her own face and looked at me like I'd shown up in a clown suit. "Elara," she said. "Must you today?" As if a professional jacket were louder than a designer gown. As if the shop's emblem were a bid for attention rather than just the truth of what I'd built while they weren't looking. Celeste, gliding past in shimmering silk, didn't even comment, just gave the jacket a flick of the eyes and a tight little smile that said, "We'll discuss this later." I caught my own reflection beside my mother's and held it. The woman in the glass did not look like furniture. She looked like someone 200 strangers would glance at twice and wonder about. My mother had spent the weekend trying to make me small enough to fit in a back corner, and I just put on the one thing that wouldn't shrink. Yes, I told her, calm as I must. If they wanted me invisible, the custom jacket was the wrong outfit to ask me to wear it in. I went to find table 12. The ballroom looked beautiful. I'll give them that even now. White linens on the tables, the grand chandeliers just past dim, a stage adorned with the same floating candles I'd votived that morning. An usher I didn't know tried to seat me in the third row behind family until my mother materialized and redirected him with a hand on his arm. "She'll be fine in the back," Vivian murmured, steering me toward the last row by the aisle, near the gap where the photographer would stand. Then lower. Just for me, with a bright apologetic smile aimed at anyone watching. "Let's not make today about you, Elara. For once." For once. As if I'd ever been allowed a single today. I took the back row seat without a word. The place card from the reception still folded in my palm. Elara guessed because I'd kept it the way you keep a receipt you might need. The keynote speaker came out first, then Celeste on my father's arm, and my father caught my eye for half a second as he passed and looked away, the same window gazing he'd done at a breakfast nook 14 years before. Some men never changed the channel. From the back row, I could see the fiancé waiting at the podium in his sharp suit, but only from behind in profile. His head bowed slightly, talking low with the event coordinator, a tall man, squared-away posture, 3 squad members beside him in similar attire, and something about the way the 4 of them stood. That loose, alert, shoulder-to-shoulder thing first responders do without meaning to pull at a memory I couldn't place and didn't try to. I'd come to watch my sister get honored, and then leave. That was the whole plan. The fiancé had not yet turned around. The MC welcomed everyone, and the fiancé lifted his head, and for one bad second, I thought I knew him. From the back of a ballroom, every first responder looks a little like a ghost you've carried. I told myself that I'd led a lot of teams. I'd written a lot of reports for a lot of clients. The brain plays tricks when you put it in a professional jacket near a man in a sharp suit and add grief and jasmine. But the longer I looked at the side of his face, the set of the jaw, a thin scar at the hairline above his right ear that I could see even from 20 feet, the harder my heart started working against the calm I keep it on. I knew that scar. I knew exactly where it came from, and the heat of the day it happened, and the sound the collapsing structure made. The man marrying my sister turned his profile to take Celeste's hands, and the years fell away, and I was no longer in a Charleston ballroom. I was at a collapsed construction site on the other side of the state, and a kid named O'Connell was bleeding from a cut above his ear while I dragged him by his harness out of a precarious structure that should have been all of our coffins.
O'Connell, Celeste O'Connell.
Liam O'Connell, the former first responder, the sweetheart with the manners. Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
I sat in the back row of my sister's gala in my custom jacket and watched a man I'd pulled out of a disaster zone 3 years and 100 miles ago promise to love and protect my sister forever. And not one person in that ballroom knew that he and I had already saved each other's lives. He still hadn't seen my face. I don't remember the speeches. I remember holding very still, the way you do when a situation has become tactical and you haven't decided your move yet. Liam O'Connell was marrying my sister. The odds of it were absurd, and also weren't. He told me once in a makeshift triage tent at 2 a.m. that he was from South Carolina and wanted a quiet life and a girl who laughed easy. Celeste laughs easy. Celeste laughs at everything that goes her way. They'd met at a yacht club. He had no way of knowing the honoree had a sister. My family didn't talk about me, and when forced to, they used the word estranged like a diagnosis. And Dubois is one of the most common names in the region. There was no reason on earth Celeste Dubois would have connected to Elara Vance, the engineer O'Connell surely talked about, because nobody connects a common last name to a person they've been told doesn't really exist. The award presentation ended.
They kissed.
The ballroom clapped, and I clapped, too, because what else do you do? Then the crowd rose and surged toward the buffet, and the photographer pulled the honorees for portraits, and O'Connell was swept off in a tide of family I wasn't part of, his back to me the entire time. I stood at the edge of it all, a fabricator in custom attire that nobody at the gala could explain, watching a near-miss play out in slow motion. We kept not crossing. The whole reception, an hour of it, I drifted at the perimeter, and he stayed at the center. And twice we came within 30 feet, and twice something turned him away first. I told myself I could still leave clean. I almost believe I'd have managed it. Here's what I decided. Standing by the dessert table with a glass of untouched sparkling cider sweating in my hand, I would go congratulate the couple briefly, the way a guest does. I'd shake Liam O'Connell's hand, and I'd watch his face, do the thing faces do, and I'd manage it. Keep it quiet. Keep it ours. No scene, no spotlight. Maybe a private word later, professional to professional, away from all this. Then I'd find Celeste, say something true and kind that cost me nothing, and I'd be gone before the toasts. My whole plan was to disappear politely. It's funny the plans we make. I'd survived a critical project by controlling variables. And I actually believed I could control this one. That I could walk up to a man who thought I was the reason he got to stand at that podium and somehow keep his gratitude on a leash as short as I keep my temper. I started across the tent toward the head table, weaving between people who looked at my jacket and then at each other. I was maybe 15 feet away when my mother intercepted me, because of course she did. She had a glass of champagne and the loose performing warmth of a woman 3 glasses in. And she caught my elbow and turned me toward a little cluster of relatives like she was presenting a curiosity. Here she is, Vivian announced. Too bright. My other daughter, the engineer. A pause for the small laughs. And then, gazing around the ballroom at her family and her flowers and her perfect day, my mother said the thing the whole weekend had apparently been building toward. The thing I'll hear for the rest of my life. I don't know, she sighed, smiling. Why does it feel like something's missing? Something's missing? She said it to a circle of relatives with me standing right there in the middle of them in my custom jacket, holding a glass I hadn't sipped, and she did not see the irony because she had never once counted me as part of the picture that could be complete. One of the aunts made a sympathetic noise, and my mother, warmed by champagne and the day and the sound of her own voice, kept going the way she always could when she had an audience. We just never could do enough for both girls. You know how it is, she said, patting my arm like proof of affection. Elara always wanted to forge her own path. She chose to leave us. We did everything we could, but some children just pull away. She gave a small, sad shrug. The long-suffering mother rewriting me in real time in front of strangers, exactly as Eleanor had warned. We could only stretch for one.
She didn't say it this time. She didn't have to.
It was the floor she'd built the whole speech on. I stood there and let her finish because I'd learned a long time ago that you let a person talk all the way to the end of the rope they're handing you. I felt very calm, calmer than I'd been all weekend. The cold, useful, quiet from the breakfast nook at 18 settled now into something 100 times stronger. I opened my mouth to say nothing dramatic, just to say my own name, just to begin to exist. And that's when a voice cut clean across the ballroom, loud enough to stop the band between songs, sharp enough that 200 people turned at once. A man's voice. Stop. Then louder, cracking. Stop talking. Liam O'Connell had turned around. He'd been 10 feet away at the head table, close enough to hear his new mother-in-law explain how her difficult daughter had chosen to abandon the family. And at some point in that little speech, he'd finally looked over to see who she was talking about. He saw the jacket first, then the face, and the color went out of his like someone had pulled a plug. Paled away the title of every story, like Mine Promises and Rarely Delivers. But I watched it happen on a living man's face. Watched my former patient go white at a gala, his own gala, because the woman his mother-in-law was burying in front of the guests was standing there in an emblem he'd recognize in his sleep. The ballroom had gone quiet at his first stop. Now, it was the kind of quiet where you can hear the string lights buzz. Celeste, beside him in shimmering silk, put a hand on his arm and said his name, confused. My mother's mouth was still half open on whatever sad sentence she'd been about to finish. And Liam O'Connell looked at me across 10 feet of his own gala reception, and his eyes filled, and his hand came up to his chest like he was checking his heart was still in there. "Ma'am," he said, just that first. The whole ballroom heard a grown man in a sharp suit call the honoree's estranged sister ma'am like a prayer. Then he turned to my mother, and his jaw set, and 3 years of being a first responder came back into his spine all at once. The next thing he said loud enough to reach table 12 and the service entrance, and every corner they'd ever tried to push me into. "Shut up." Liam O'Connell said it to my mother, to his own mother-in-law on his gala day in front of 200 people. And then into the ringing silence that followed. Quieter, but somehow louder. You don't know who she is. Lessons from this story. Parental favoritism and deception can cause deep, lasting harm. Adversity can forge immense personal strength and independence. Lies, no matter how carefully constructed, will eventually unravel. Past acts of kindness can return to you in unexpected, crucial moments.